Chairman, we're now live.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a warm welcome to those attending and also to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is a meeting of the Resident Services Select Committee. My name is Councillor Bridges and I am Chairman of this meeting. The key role of this committee is to monitor performance of local public services within its remit and to hold in-depth reviews on topics of resident interest. We engage with a range of external witnesses in our activity, which can include community groups, residents and subject matter experts. Where we identify areas for change or improvement, we make recommendations to the decision-making cabinet. Details of the business to be considered today are shown on the agenda, copies of which are available in the room and also accessible on YouTube underneath the broadcast. For those present in the room and intending to speak, please note that you'll be filmed and any statements will be recorded and made public. And for those in the public gallery, you will not be on camera. Reminder to councillors and officers speaking today that you should turn your microphone button on when speaking. This will ensure you can be heard in the room and by those watching online. A few housekeeping rules before we move on to the main agenda. Please ensure your mobile devices are switched off or placed on silent. We're not expecting a fire alarm this evening. However, if one does sound, please follow the officers to the exits indicated above the doors. And we move on now to the agenda for the apologies for absence, please.
No apologies this evening, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest in matters coming before this meeting? I can see no indications, thank you. Which brings us on to item 3, to receive the minutes of the previous meeting, pages 1 to 10. Are there any questions or comments? Agreed, thank you very much. I can confirm that all business this evening will be in part 1. There are no part 2 items to be considered. Item 5, pages 11 to 26, are the budget proposals for the services within the remit of the Resident Services Select Committee. And this evening we have Gemma and Kerry. Very warm welcome to you both, and whenever you're ready, please give your presentation to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the second finance appearance at the Select Committee, with the first being back in summer when we presented the emerging challenges facing the Council's budget for the new financial year. In December, the Cabinet approved a set of budget proposals presenting a balanced budget for 23-24. This Cabinet meeting then started the budget consultation process, with the consultation currently open to the public and Finance presenting the detailed budget proposals to each Select Committee for services that fall within their remit. The feedback from this committee will be included in the budget report, which will be presented to February Cabinet, where Cabinet will be asked to approve the budget proposals to full Council. Headlines presented in this year's budget report include exceptional inflationary requirements, with inflation exceeding 10%, which is the highest level since October 1981. This is clearly having an impact not only on the Council's cost of services, but also the residents in Hillingdon through the cost of living crisis. Furthermore, the budget also includes COVID-19 legacy issues. To put this into context of the Council's overall budget, back in February 2022, the savings requirement for the 23-24 financial year were expected to be 10 million. The budget report now presents a requirement of 20 million and includes measures to bridge the gap and deliver a balanced budget. Specific to the remit of this committee, the budget includes an additional 3.2 million to meet the inflationary demands of contracted expenditure and energy costs. An additional 3.2 million has been included to support demand-led services, and savings of 11.9 million have been identified through a review of services for efficiency, such as improving recycling rates, a review of funding streams and fees and charges proposals. There is planned capital investment across the Council budgets of £340 million over a 5-year MTFF period. The capital budget within the remit of this committee is 11.2 million for 23-24. This includes 6.3 million for chrysalis and playground replacement programmes and 2.6 million for shopping parades initiatives to improve local high streets. The housing revenue account also falls within the remit of this service. The HRA is a ring-fenced self-financing account whereby rental income from social housing units is reinvested in the management, maintenance and expansion of stock. Underlying the proposals is a 30-year business plan, which demonstrates the HRA is financially sustainable. The budget strategy on the HRA is structured around 3 key programmes, that being housing supply, estate regeneration and works to existing stock. As for the general fund, there are inflationary pressures currently running in excess of 10%, with the construction industry tracking higher than this. Rent increases, however, have been capped at 7%, so there is a gap driving the need for efficiencies. Efficiencies within the HRA total 1.7 million over the next 3 years, and the initiatives to do this include substantial planned capital investment, which will minimise the requirement for higher cost reactives, a review of contract expenditure, and a review of back office services. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll now invite questions from members. If there are any, please indicate now. Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I'd just like to ask a few initial questions. The housing pressures, so point 29, page 17, you talk about an additional demand funding of 2.1 million. Given the circumstances in the country and the borough, what with interest rates affecting mortgages, and has knock-on effect to the private rental sector, do we think that the 2.1 million is sufficient, or is that not been factored into your calculations, or has it? Justification for that. And also with COVID legacy issues, the reference to new and emerging, I'd like to know what they are, please. Thank you.
Okay, in response to the homelessness question, yes, we have modelled, we're comfortable that we've modelled an increase of demand coming through from the cost of living crisis. So we've included private sector evictions, domestic situations where that might result in homelessness, and we're confident that we've modelled with efficiencies through the service as well, that we can deliver and support those coming through.
For me, on the second point to do with the new and emerging issues in relation to COVID, this is obviously as part of the wider council budget rather than particular to the remit within this committee, but the impact that we've had from COVID has affected a huge number of services across the council. Predominantly social care has also changed behaviour in terms of things like some of the fees and charges of the services that we offer, for example parking. We continue to monitor what's happening as a result of COVID, and with the continual strain on families as a result of COVID, the general cost of living crisis and the kind of emerging issues from that front, we're seeing a number of areas of increased pressure for things like domestic violence, for example, so we keep them under review throughout the year.
Councillor Farley, you wish to follow up?
Thank you, Chair. I assumed that in terms of what comes under this remit of this council, the emerging pressures may be to do with or connected with the leisure centres and the demand in that area. That's sort of where I thought that was going with that, but I wanted clarity on what it was about. I do have some other questions, Chair. I'm not sure what the other committee members...
As per the usual process, Councillor Farley, if you can ask a supplementary question, we'll go around the table, and then after everyone's had a chance to ask a question, I'll go back to you. The fees and charges that have been, as you mentioned, about the savings, this reference is on page 18.33. The subsidy, I'd like to know what the value of that is and where that's been allocated. So the subsidy that's not being borne by taxpayers, where that's been reallocated to, please.
In terms of the subsidy, so for each of the areas that are presented as fees and charges increase, the council's moved towards a cost recovery basis. So currently, the council tax income that we receive, which represents about, between business rates and council tax, is about 75% of the funding that comes into the council. That is subsidising these areas that are subject to fees and charges. If with the increases that we'll be putting in place as part of this budget consultation, that helps us to deliver the savings targets. So as we mentioned, we've got the 20,791 thousand. The part of the delivery of that is to do with the fees and charges programme to be able to deliver that in the future year.
Thank you. Councillor Gohill.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, just following on Councillor Farley's point about the homelessness, it's written in the report, homelessness continues to see an additional demand presenting to the service. Could you provide a few more details on exactly what that demand is, or any statistics, because there don't seem to be any? Thank you.
Yes, yes, I can. So, we're estimating over this financial year, we're probably going to take an additional 500 homeless applications to the year before. Main reasons for homeless approaches, unfortunately, continues to be private sector evictions. And this is an outcome of the of COVID, when the courts were closed. Landlords were serving notice but unable to carry that through to court eviction, and now the courts are catching up with that. And so a lot of our temporary accommodation placements were actually the bailiff warrant, and we can't, because of the private rented sector market in London at the moment. Rents are very high. I think everyone is very much aware of that, and so us supporting a family to move into another private rented property is proving more and more difficult on a monthly basis, and so unfortunately families are going into temporary accommodation and they're staying there for longer periods of time. We're also seeing continued large numbers of domestic abuse referrals and families coming in, and that represents a large number of our temporary accommodation placements as well. Again, we're accommodating a number of Ukrainian households in temporary accommodation. We're still picking up a number of rough sleepers, and so yes, across the board, demand continues to grow. But we have a number of action plans in place going into this year to reduce our reliance on temporary accommodation, and hopefully, and hence why we've set the budget where it is now. Which will be able to negate the increase in homeless demand that we're having at the moment.
Councillor
Gohill. If I could just follow up on that quickly. So, could you share with us how far back this data goes? So, if I was looking at it in terms of a graph, was it increased in 2019, then it dropped in 2020 and 21, and then there's been a sharp rise again, or is that how it's worked out, or has it been quite high consistently and it's just sharply risen?
Unfortunately, there has been a year-on-year increase in homeless approaches, I would probably say, for the last 4 or 5 years. And so even though we've seen an increase over this last year of probably 10-20%, we had similar numbers the year before and the year before that as well. So presentations continue to rise, and a lot of it is simply because of the unaffordability of self-finding your own housing option. So being able to move into another private rented property yourself, or a young person being able to share with friends. I mean, the housing options are becoming increasingly limited, and so unfortunately families are having to approach us when they can't stay where they are, when they're being evicted, when there's a discharge from an institution, and unfortunately they can't source their own solutions. It's a worrying time, I'd say.
Yeah.
Councillor Gardner.
Yeah. Thanks for your presentation. I've got a question first of all. On page 19, 37, it says installation of LED lights within the feeders and granges car parks to reduce energy costs. Are they the only car parks that cover car parks that's going to be done in? Because we've got car park, like Blythe Road car park is one that definitely needs. Now, there's also, hang on, sorry, housing revenue account on the estate regeneration. Unless I'm very much mistaken, isn't that funded by the GLA? Didn't they give the money for that one? And also on the special collections where the fees are going up, don't you think that's probably a false economy because it encouraged more fly tipping?
Thank you, Councillor. On the Cedars and Granges car park, I know those are two particular car parks where the work is currently underway to replace the lighting as it stands with LED lighting. I would have to take that away to find out if there is a planned rollout for the remainder of the car parks. However, I know that the drive to reduce energy costs and also be more environmentally friendly in terms of our energy consumption is one of the key priorities of the administration, so I would expect us to have a plan in place, but I'm going to take that away and check on that, if I may. Sorry, while I'm still on that page, if you don't mind, I'll do your third question first. With the special collections, again, as with the majority of these fees and charges, we are looking to recover the costs of the service, and the fees that have been proposed will help us to ensure that it runs at a cost-neutral basis. We've been working in closely with the service to generate those proposals, and we would keep any additional fly tipping that may happen under close monitoring and scrutiny of that. However, the service is confident that this fee is pitched at the correct level for that. And sorry, your second question was on GLA. I'm afraid on your third question to do with GLA funding and housing regen, I would have to take that away as well and get some more information. Unfortunately, the remit of this committee is so broad it covers most of the finance team, so I'm going to have to take that one away and come back to you if I may, if I can direct the comments back through the chair. Thank you.
Councillor Gardner, do you have a supplementary you wish to ask? Okay. Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to, we've prided ourselves as a council on having the lowest fees and charges in London, and despite some modest increases, do we still believe that in most cases the average spend per resident will still see Hillingdon as the council delivering the lowest fees and charges in London? And then I also just wanted to get comment on how we think the current financial situation will have an impact on things like the Hayes Estate Regeneration Scheme and the delivery of the Leisure Centre in Usually and West Drayton. I certainly know in other boroughs in London some of these big capital projects are being cancelled and just not happening, and just a reassurance that we will continue to put those two very important schemes put them first as we do our residents.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, it's safe to say that Hillingdon is certainly among the lowest in terms of fees and charges, if not the lowest across London. The increases that are included within this still keep us firmly in the lower end of the London charges. I think whereas previous authorities, or other authorities, have increased steadily over the years, we've held fairly low. And even with these increases, this is to catch up to an extent, but it still doesn't meet the same as our neighbouring boroughs. The immediate neighbours, for example, in West London, raise about £209 per resident, whereas these fees and charges would generate about 108 within Hillingdon. So there is still quite a difference between the rest of London. With regard to the capital projects, obviously the cost of construction, the inflationary impacts is a huge concern. And I think across the nation, it's a huge concern of the increase in costs. The projects that you refer to are still contained within the capital programme, and officers work very hard with the suppliers to make sure that we are still trying to achieve value for money in terms of the construction and keep any increases in costs under close scrutiny.
Councillor Small.
Chair, I just think it should be noted that the officers should be commended for working with the administration to put together a budget that balances, and I'd just like to congratulate them on what is a good news budget, while still delivering low fees and charges and some of the lowest bandy council tax in the capital.
Thank you very much. I have a question on graffiti, page 35. The £85,000 saving. It was my understanding graffiti was an outsourced service. Is this a procurement saving? Is there a post being deleted within the council? Where does this saving come from?
I believe that there is a small team that go out to identify where graffiti is actually in across the borough. I think the the removal of said graffiti is contracted out. However, there is a small team that still work across the borough to be able to assess that. The intention would be that as part of the wider green spaces review that we are reviewing the roles and responsibilities and making sure that we are streamlining as much as possible, so if officers are already out and about that they are picking up on any issues like that.
Thank you. Are there any other members who... okay. Councillor... I know Councillor Farley's got a few questions to ask, so I'll go to the other two first and then we'll finish with Councillor Farley. Councillor Gardner.
No, I just want to make a comment about the removal of graffiti. I don't care if it's outsourced, well I do actually, but I want to make sure that the vile graffiti that we sometimes see is always treated as a priority. So can you take that back to somebody?
I think certainly racist graffiti and very offensive graffiti is a policy of the council to remove it within 24 hours if reported, so I don't think that's changed in the years I've been a councillor. Perhaps the officers could add further to that. But Councillor Gohill.
Thank you, Chairman. Just two quick questions. First one regarding the green spaces. I noticed, especially along my ward, along West Racing Road leading to Stockley Park, that we had, during the summer months and autumn months, we had lovely wildflowers continuing to grow. Can you confirm that they're going to be continuing under the green spaces scheme and will continue much more, hopefully much more wildflowers and wild grass growing, because it does wonders for biodiversity? If you could confirm that, that'd be helpful. And the second question was just regarding our waste services. I understand that recently we changed the lots of people, residents, including myself included, had a change in dates so we could rejig the waste services, so to say. I know I still continue to get a very good service, but is that consistent across the borough? Could you confirm if we're still getting a good service and good value for money across the borough on our waste services?
Thank you, Councillor. I was just actually about to say we are very fortunate to have the head of Green Spaces here, so I'm sure we'd be able to talk at length about wildflowers in the borough, if you don't mind me deferring to him on that.
So with the wildflowers, the initial scheme was planted wildflowers. We're now going into a process of where those areas are being allowed to naturally regenerate. So there might not be such a diverse mix of bright colours, but they will be really good for biodiversity, and all the areas that have previously been wildflowers will continue to be wildflowers, or albeit more native than the really colourful ones we had during the COVID pandemic.
Thank you. And just to your other question regarding waste, absolutely, I think there is a consistently high quality service across the borough. I think as you'll be able to see from the paper, in terms of the savings that are being put forward, it is really about encouraging residents and schools and businesses to be undertaking more recycling. So obviously better for the environment anyway, but it helps us deliver a far more cost effective service. And through the reduced rates of disposal costs for recycling, it means that we can keep our waste disposal costs at a minimum and help to contain the growth from having an expanding borough in terms of the housing population.
Can I just say, it's not really a question, but can I just say I'm really pleased that we can be providing cost-effective solutions whilst maintaining our high levels of service to residents, and I think everyone appreciates that, but they don't quite see the financial saving on the background, so I'm sure everyone in this room as councillors will understand that.
Thank you. Are there any members who've not yet asked a question wanting to do so? If not, I'll finish off with Councillor Farley. Councillor Farley, when you're free.
Thank you, Chair. Some of the questions have been asked. I do wish to know a bit more about the point 37, page 19. The locality needs-based approach for libraries. I'd like to know what that is. I'd also like to know how much the increase in the permit parking is expected to raise. And finally, aside from the public consultation that's going on, Given when this budget was created, is there anything that we should be aware of as a committee that has altered or changed, in your opinion, since then? Thank you.
Sorry, frantically scribbling down to make sure I should respond to all of your questions. In terms of the library's approach, I think as part of the wider approach with community hubs across the borough as well, really making sure that we have bespoke services to local communities. The libraries is absolutely a firm point of that, and it's a key contact point for residents in each of those locations. However, the different populations require different things from their library services. There will be a library strategy that comes out for public consultation that will have far more detail in it. However, the intention would be that we're looking at what the service is that's being delivered in each location, ensuring that the hub locations and key areas across the borough have a strong and encompassing offer for library services, and then we tailor the other sites across the borough to what the resident demands are in that area, while maintaining a number of our online offerings, such as Borrow Box, so that residents are still able to access books at all times. The second question that you asked on the permit parking, I believe that this charge has been set is to deliver cost-neutral basis for the parking management schemes in the local areas, which I believe runs at £500,000, but I would want to just check that figure. That's where the level of the fee has been set at, so that those are on a cost-neutral basis to the council, to residents. And in terms of your final point on the budget, obviously when we set these papers and when we set the budget, the government hadn't published their funding announcements, which came out I think on the 20th of December, so quite late in this process. We made a number of assumptions that went into this budget, and comparing to the announcements that came out, we're still confident that actually it does represent, although there were minor changes here and there, that our assumptions were fairly sound in terms of the announcements that were made. So there'd be very, very little change to this budget in light of the budget announcements.
Councillor Farley, do you wish to add anything further?
If I may, thank you, Chair. Just come back to the library. You mentioned there's a strategy to come out. Do we know when that's going to be, or what the time frame is for that to come?
It's certainly this year. We want to check with the service and make sure exactly when. I know that it is being drafted at the moment.
Councillor Smallwood, you did indicate.
Chair, just on the library point, I've already been feeding information into the cabinet member responsible. One of the banks approached me in Ruislip to speak about potentially going into some of our libraries where their bank is not based in other towns' locations, and I think that is exactly the kind of way that when we talk about, and I'll just find the right words. Apologies. This locality needs-based approach, that is exactly the kind of thing I think we should be doing, and I'm looking forward to seeing that library strategy. And I think it's really important that we can save money whilst providing a better library service. That's a good thing.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the members for their questions and the officers for their presentations. You'll see on the report that the committee are recommended to note the reports and ask the questions as required, which we've done. Is the committee happy for me to form the response on behalf of this committee outside of this meeting in liaison with the Labour lead? Yes. Thank you very much. And thank you to the officers. Gemma and Kerry, you're free to leave whenever you wish to do so. We now move on to item 6, which is the tree strategy, pages 27 and 48, and we have Stuart and Sophie with us this evening. Good evening to you both. Whenever you're ready, please give your presentation to the committee.
Again, not really a presentation, but the purpose of the report is to give members a chance to comment on the draft tree strategy before it goes through the formal cabinet member approval process. Currently, our tree stock is managed on a reactive basis, very much ad hoc, with best arboricultural practice in mind, but without set guidelines. We are trying to achieve a clear and unambiguous policy in how we manage our trees setting out what we can do and what we won't do. It sets out the inspection regime for trees on highways, parks and our housing sites. And as a result, a well-managed tree stock will result in less insurance claims and more defendable claims and a reduction in emergency works. So the strategy's there, and we welcome any comments and any questions regarding the strategy.
Thank you. Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. With the surname Smallwood, it would be remiss of me not to speak about trees. I just wondered, when we have sad instances, and trees are quite big, unmovable things, and sometimes tragic things happen, especially with cars and trees, and you often find that people like to put memorials up on an annual basis, maybe birthdays and Christmas, and sometimes they can be there for a long period of time. At the very beginning they look incredibly nice, but then they can become quite an eyesore or tatty, which definitely won't be what the family or the people wanted to put up. Could we have some kind of policy where we liaise, or we try and liaise with the people that are putting these things up on an annual basis to say, look, there's a month or a period of time that we go to consultation to make sure that it continues to look sightly. I had an email from somebody who had one, and they felt terrible for writing the email. They felt terrible for saying that they wanted to move, but it had just sort of like, the name bits had dropped off, the cards had all become, with the rain, the thing had run, and it didn't look as nice as it had maybe 2 months before. And just clearing them up at an agreed time and having an agreed strategy that is also sympathetic that these things are very powerful and very meaningful to the people that are putting them up.
Yes, there actually is a highways policy already, because most of these accidents obviously happen on highways trees. There is a policy that allows memorials to be there for 12 months. After that, they will be removed, and if there are anniversaries of events, then it's not another 12 months, and they get removed in a timely fashion. So there already is that policy in place, which is a highways policy, because these accidents happen on other structures as well, not just trees.
Councillor Gardner.
Well, as my surname's Gardner, I can talk what I like. What I would like is when you plant your trees and some little git goes past and knocks them all down, it's very, very rare that people will go along and replant them. So when you say ad hoc inspections, is there any way that you can keep an eye? I'm talking mainly about Dawley Road, in front of the Lake Farm, where all those were knocked down. If somebody could keep an eye on them, because otherwise they just become a mess, and it's a bit of a joke with people now about that. There's that, and there was something else. And the root growth causing service irregularity. How bad does it have to be before somebody actually does something about it? Because I've reported root growth that's come through, and I was told that it's not a hazard. Well, tell that to the woman that fell over on it. Yeah.
So with our tree planting, we do try and check. We've had a very limited officer resource. She's sitting here for the last period of time, but we're recruiting at the moment. We've got one new officer already started, and we've got 2 more positions. So those regular inspections on highways will happen more regularly. As long as these things are reported to us, we will get out there and deal with our direct labour to put those right straight away, because they're planting our trees now, which is working really well. So please report them, and our teams will get out there and rectify that where they can, or replant them the next planting season if we need to. So your second question. So there are intervention levels on highway disruption. We will always work with the highways team around what those intervention levels are and whether we can make that highway safe. We will ramp up over routes to try and retain the mature trees to a point. Where it becomes a point where the tree has outlived its place, then we will look to remove and replant with a more suitable tree. We have lots of unsuitable trees in our, because planting practices 50, 60 years ago weren't around right tree, right place. It was just whatever they had in the back of the yard, they chucked in the hole. So we're getting much better at that, but there will be a point that a tree is causing damage to a point where it it isn't suitable in that location anymore, and we will remove. But that is our last option.
Councillor Gohill.
Thank you, Chairman. Just quickly on page 31 under the policy statements, it was written, the council seek to increase tree cover across the borough by annually planting more trees than are felled. And it also says the council will seek to identify new locations where tree planting will be particularly beneficial to the environment. Can we confirm, just two questions here, the trees that are falling and the trees that are being planted, are they in the same area roughly? I mean, you know, we pride ourselves in Hillingdon to be quite a green borough, but we don't want the instance where all the trees are falling in Hayes, for example, and they're being planted in Northwood. So can we confirm that they're roughly being planted in kind of the same areas? And also, just out of interest, what kind of trees are being planted? Is there one particular type? Is it a native tree, or are they, if we could get a bit more information on that, please. Thank you.
Okay, so with our street trees and the likes, we try and replant. If a tree's been removed for a certain reason or fallen over or whatever, we try and locate that as close as possible. So with our tree plants of that nature, yes, one for one in the same kind of area. But our bigger planting projects, and I think we removed, 600 trees last year and planted 16,000. So but those are shelter belts and things like that. So they have to go in larger green spaces, an area that is protecting the environment and screening pollution and stuff like that. So yes, we try and maintain the green feel. Again, some of these streets where they really aren't suitable for big trees and they have been removed, then we will try and keep them in that ward or that locale, but maybe not bang back in that street, because we're only sort of reciprocating the problems we've already received. So not every street's suitable, even though it has maybe had trees in the past.
Just one quick follow-up, and it is a quick one. Can you just confirm that it is still one of the goal and aims of this council to retain and improve on the number of green flags that we currently have and will hopefully get in the future as well?
So for this year, we are applying for the 67 we already have. We're not putting any new ones in this year, but it is our aim to remain in the scheme and still be at the forefront and in front of every other borough by a good long way. In the world, even. As Councillor Avery often says.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. Unless I've missed it, and you can point me to it, in the strategy, I have two areas, mainly to do with new trees, and something I would like committee to consider amending the strategy on this basis, is to do with maintenance and a specific area within the strategy for maintenance. To my mind and to my experience as a councillor over the years, there's has been a problem with some of the newly planted trees and caring for them. I find a lot of them end up dying. For one, I know we've had a lot of hot weather in recent years as well, but that's also another reason why they need to be maintained. And I've been out and watered trees in my old ward during the summer to maintain them. I know residents are invited to do so as well, but nevertheless, the council's putting them in, and we're planting them, and they're dying and then having to be replaced. So I'd like an area within this to be about maintenance, and the cycle that's been referred to in here, and correct me if I'm wrong, it suggests this is all trees. I would have thought, and I'm not the expert here, but I would have thought for new trees, at least for a short period, there should be an increased cycle on the new trees to make sure that they're embedding, that they are taking and surviving. I say, forgive me, but I'm not. There's a lot about risk management and so forth in here, but I would like to have a specific section that's on maintenance of trees, and particularly new ones. and young trees. Thank you.
Okay, so our new trees are all watered for the first 3 years. Obviously, the past couple of years particularly have been very challenging, and we accept that we possibly haven't got enough water on trees, hence our encouragement for residents to water trees. We're going to bring, that was contracted out previously, we're going to bring the maintenance of those young trees back in-house. So the guys that plant them during the winter are also going to be watering them during the summer. So they should be being visited much more regularly. They will then report that back to us, and we will take whatever action we need. We're also trying to plant more drought-tolerant species, so they survive a little bit better. But again, in those first 3 years, that's a really tough environment, particularly if they're going in a highway situation. And that's why we're trying to move more towards planting in grass areas, which isn't always applicable in some of the areas. But if we can plant in grass, they establish an awful lot better.
Yes. Thank you. Again, I say we're not committee wants to do that, or we can ask committee to have. We say that one of the recommendations is to add to or amend or to by comments to do that. I would like to have a particular section on maintenance, because I really am quite passionate that our young trees are maintained and that we're not letting them go. And then finally, I just wanted to get some clarity on page 34 about trees and tenants' back gardens. Are front gardens different? But also, I know it does refer to working with tenancy management and the arboricultural manager, but for sort of people that are on, if the requirement is for them to maintain the tree, there's obviously risk there for the resident and so on and so forth. I just wanted a little bit more clarity on that as well, please.
So I think it should say gardens in general rather than back gardens. Sometimes we will step in a bit more if it's a front garden, because there may be an issue of it going into the highway. But yeah, we can definitely amend that so it says gardens in general. And in relation to risk and tenants, that is something that they should take on as part of their tenancy agreement. But we understand that in some instances, depending on the tenant, they're not able to for various reasons, and that's not just monetary reasons, it's other things as well. So that's why we talk to tenancy about that. And sometimes it's just we go and do an inspection and we put their minds at rest, and then sometimes it's we arrange work as well. So there is a lot of communication between, obviously it's the tenant's garden, and sometimes they'll want to manage it in a way that makes their garden nicer in their view. We still take it as a risk-based approach to both the tenant and also our properties.
Thank you very much. Councillor Punjar.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I just wanted to say that I'm really delighted to see a tree strategy in the borough. I think that it's much needed, and for all the reasons that have been stated here about the maintenance of our trees. And I think you've already answered my question, really, but I just wanted to highlight it again, is that there are areas in our borough, across the borough actually, that have trees planted, like you say, 50, 60 years ago, when places weren't as developed as what they were, when the soil actually does change over years because of environment and climate change, that those trees don't serve the purpose for the landscape anymore, and they are actually damaging to the landscape. So therefore you have said that they are taken out and being replaced with more suitable trees. Do we have an advisor or a consultant, or is that some in-house that does that? You do that, do you? Okay. Knowing the knowledge, because I know, like, we've got coppices, but now in an overdeveloped area in Useley, coppices are not really good for that environment and don't survive, and so they cause quite a lot of damage actually than doing good to that area. And just the other thing about this plantation of trees as well, we have to remind ourselves that whilst we want to be a green borough, that once you take out a fully grown tree and you plant it with a young tree, it's that growth period of maybe 10 to 12 years before it has the benefits of a growth tree. So how do we mitigate that? Because we also don't want to just produce young trees and plant young trees. We also need to have a balance of trees to kind of have the environmental impact that it needs to have.
Yeah, so with our policy of planting more trees annually than we remove, we're kind of getting ahead of the game. So over that period of time, we will have a nice uneven age structure of trees which will benefit the environment. So we will have a lot of young trees, but we'll also have those veteran trees and the ageing trees that are coming to their time for removal. So it's that process. Unfortunately, there's been a bit of a gap, and we've got lots of young trees and lots of really, really old trees, but we can only address that now, really, by our planting proposals going forward.
Councillor Punja, do you want to add anything further?
One more thing, actually, and in your suggestion about the drought, trees that basically survive in drought weather. Do we have the right climate for that as well? Because whilst we only have a few days where it is drought weather, most of our time we've got quite high rain, so we have quite extreme weathers at the moment. So drought kind of planting is usually happened in very high tropical countries, which England is not. So I'm just kind of going to assess that to go make sure that we don't go down one road without really assessing our climate and what we need to have for survival, because what will happen to those plants? They will die because we'll have huge rainfall at the other end.
Yeah, so drought tolerance isn't drought resistance necessarily. There are species that are emerging, so we work very closely with our local nurseries and where we source our trees from, and they're getting lots of data from trees which are successful in town centres because of the heat radiation and the flood events. So yeah, it's emerging. Who knows whether we're getting it right at the moment? We'll only know in 60, 70 years' time. But there's an awful lot of research into the right tree, right place, and lots of much brighter people than me are looking into those and what trees are being successful. And we've also got anecdotal evidence of what's been successful working in trees and what species are really doing well at the moment. So it's kind of that evolving scheme of things that way.
Thank you.
Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 points. How do we work with some of our residents? I'm thinking of people like the Ruislip Woods Management Advisory Group, who are beyond experts on trees, who are doing things like trees that fall, they're building them into leaky dams to help with flood management and flood prevention. How do we work with them and take some of those people who have got years of expert advice who could potentially help the council? And the second one is around when a tree is removed and a hole is created, about double checking the safety and the maintenance of the hole. I've got a couple of where I almost went down a hole, which might please some people, but I can see Councillor Gardner trying not to laugh. But how are we doing that? Because sometimes in the period where they might be replacing the tree, there is a hole left there and it's dangerous. And I've got a few examples of that.
So on the first point, we work very closely, obviously, with the Ruislip Woods Management Advisory Group. They are more woodland experts than trees experts necessarily, but we're working with them all the time, and I have a very close relationship with our woodland officer who attends their meetings on a regular basis, and we use their expertise in lots of ways. And other residents' associations as well. There are often groups that come to us about planting orchards and things like that, so Sophie works very closely with them. So we'll always work with whoever has advice to give us. Sorry, remind me the second one? Yeah. So our removal contractor, on removing the tree, grinding the stump, should make that area safe. With our previous contractor, it's safe to say we had a few issues around how that was put back. So we're working with our new contractor now, RSK Highline, and we're getting more seamless with highways to either cap the areas if we can't plant straight away, or get the tree in as quickly as we possibly can. So yeah, it's a work in progress. It's not perfect every time, but we try and make the highway as safe as we possibly can at the time of removal.
Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. Trees that were blown down by the bad weather last year, some of them haven't been replaced. Do you know when that'll happen? Please.
So we plant 2 batches each winter with our in-house planting team. They planted the first batch before Christmas, and the second batch is coming in the next couple of weeks, ready for planting before the end of March.
Right.
The second batch includes 218 trees on there. Now, because it's just been myself for quite a little while, there may be trees that I've missed that have blown down in the storm, so by all means, you can let us know. If there's a location where you want a tree, then get in contact. I can either make sure it's already on the list or put it onto the list.
And another point is the memorial garden in Pole Hill. There's still some trees, I think there's about 10 that haven't been put in. There's still 10 gaps. I don't know when that'll take place.
Yep. So they weren't put in because of the flooding that was occurring. So as long as that's all been sorted, and I need to speak to colleagues to find out whether that's been done, they will go in this winter as well. And there are some gapping up we need to do because some did fail as a result of the really, really hot weather last year as well.
Councillor Gohill.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just going to circle back quickly to maintenance, if that's okay. This is partly for you, Stuart, and also perhaps you as well, Chairman. I noticed Councillor Foley mentioned that he'd like it to be part of the council's policy that around that we have something specific on maintenance. I understand that we actually have quite a lot on maintenance already, and I'm conscious, given that we just talked about the budget, that any time we put a policy in, it incurs a cost to the council to ensure that policy's fulfilled. So just a kind of suggestion that's, I'm not sure if it's within the remit of the council to make suggestions, but I'll say it anyway. Just a suggestion of what we could do for newly planted trees. I know they have those cages around them to ensure that they grow. Perhaps on those cages we can install signs to encourage residents to water them if they're looking sparse. And maybe as well, if we want to engage younger citizens and children, etc., we can maybe include some information on what kind of tree this is. It'll stop people long enough to maybe look at it and maybe encourage them to look after it as well. And I think that's a reasonable suggestion we can make that will help maintain the trees without incurring a cost on the Green Spaces team to consistently, and Highways team to consistently go out and search for trees that are possibly being felled. I think that would be quite a good idea. I don't know what you think.
So on each newly planted tree, we have a label which says "Please water me," and that's on our website as well. So the green bags that you see are water bags. So somebody can go out with a watering can, fill that bag up, and it basically slowly percolates water down. So yeah, that's why they're there. We obviously fill them up, but maybe there's a bit more we can do on the website and everything like that to encourage more people to look at that. But it is there.
Thank you, Councillor Gohill. That was on my notes to mention at the end, actually. I haven't forgot about Councillor Farley's comments. I think you're right. I would certainly endorse what Councillor Farley was saying, particularly in the summer months. We had an issue with constantly watering the trees because they were drying so quickly. Officers may wish to have a think about that in terms of perhaps engaging with our schools and scouts and uniform groups and how we can develop a strategy to help us as an authority to water them. But I think as far as this committee goes, I think just having them as official comments, I'll take steerage from Democratic Services on this, but having them as comments to go before the report to the Cabinet member would be sufficient. Okay.
Yeah, that's correct, Chairman. So we can provide comments on the strategy before it's submitted to the Cabinet member if we wish to.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Farley?
Thank you, Chair. Broadly, yes, but I say it was more that was something that was specific because it is. I just going around where I represent, but also locally, where I live and elsewhere in the borough. I have noted that we have had a particular issue with young trees, and that's what I'm sort of focused on. I understand what Councillor Gohill is saying, but nevertheless, there's a cost to them dying and having to replant another one. So it's sort of half dozen ever. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gardner.
I was going to say that same as Councillor Farley. To be perfectly honest with you, although I live in Dawley Road, I've got no intention of walking up and down it with a watering can right in front of Lake Farm. And there's lots of businesses, they won't come out and do it. So I think it is essential that we have some sort of maintenance.
Thank you very much. We've discussed this item for a while now, so I'm going to be moving on. What I would propose, if all members are happy, is that perhaps myself and Councillor Farley can work on the comments outside this meeting to put in this report to go before the Cabinet member in liaison with the officers as well. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you to the officers again for your attendance, and you can leave when you wish to do so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you all soon.
Our next item is the Housing Transformation Project, and we have Mark with us this evening. Good evening, Mark. Please give a talk whenever you're ready.
Good evening, thank you, Chair. This is a really good news story, actually. So I hope the report sort of sets out exactly what we've been trying to achieve over the last 6 months. And actually, we started working with PwC back in summer of 2021. And we were looking at customer journey mapping and look at our processes and how we engage with our customers on a day-to-day basis. And some of the work that came out of that, which included some of how our council tenants could look at their rent statements online, how they could pay online, and pre-housing advice for those wanting to join the housing register. It led on to what is their Perform Plus programme that a number of you may have heard in a number of other briefing notes. And Perform Plus is a coaching programme for all officers, and that's the key thing for us. It's not just a coaching programme for managers; it's a coaching programme for officers as well. And it supports how officers lead and support each other, and then how managers coach as well. Coaching is a learned skill, and we all manage in our own ways. In whatever industries we're in, we all run our one-to-ones, our appraisals, our service plans. And maybe we're slightly stuck in our ways on how we've done that. Certainly, I've been in councils for 20 years. I still do a yearly appraisal, etc. But PwC and Perform Plus sought to embed new ways of engaging with staff and new ways of how we supported each other and delivered services in a much more proactive way that sought really to improve the service we were giving to our residents. So. It started as a 3-month intensive investment, I will call it, in all of our officers. Started beginning of last August, ended the end of October, and it was supported by PwC, but then it was being picked up by our internal learning and development team. And in essence, Perform Plus is a series of practical sessions with staff, which is every day. This great word called a huddle, which is how we start the day with our officers now, but also weekly learning in cascades. And we use the word cascade because we train our managers to teach. So we would start the week with a professional training program for our officers about how such as trigger points, such as dealing with difficult behaviour, and then those managers would train officers halfway through that week. It was about developing best practice, and it was about officers coming together in a much more open way. So obviously we're a new housing directorate, and that's key for me. I became Director of Housing last July. And actually for us, it was actually how do we work closer as two services together, a housing needs service and a housing management service, and what are our synergies from our staff who look after our sheltered properties to those who process our housing registration applications on a daily basis. What were the opportunities for sharing best practice? And so on a day-to-day basis, and it happened this morning, we have 18 teams in housing. We had 18 huddles this morning. A huddle is basically a way of officers getting together online. Before COVID, that would have been officers gathering around a table and discussing their daily targets and goals. Post-COVID now, that's an online meeting. Starts every morning. I have a huddle. My managers have a huddle. and we look at our targets for the day, targets for the week, and how we're going to achieve that. That may sound a lot, but actually pulling our officers together on a daily basis actually helps them set out what they want to achieve that day. If you think about what we talked about earlier, the number of homeless applications we have in, actually that's shared across all of our services. So you think about our housing registration applications, you think about maybe a rough sleeper we've picked up the night before, you think about something that's happened within tenancy management in regards to a disrepair in a property, a boiler's broken down, etc. Then you can see that every morning people are coming into work, and actually the point of that huddle is to share that work on a daily basis. As part of that work as well, officers, teams have put together their own KPIs. So what would they want to monitor themselves on, rather than what would a manager want to monitor a member of staff on? And so actually, we're in our housing advice and homeless teams, one of our key KPIs is our personal housing plans. And so, as a number of you are aware, a personal housing plan is a legal requirement for every resident who's making a homeless application. So actually, we were one of the things our officers wanted us to look at was how we monitored the number of personal housing plans we were able to do, and how then they supported that journey that the resident was going on. Part of it also was looking at best practice documents. So all of our services, we have created a plethora of paperwork in regards to best practice guides that actually is very useful for then training new officers coming through. But also, for officers in the service and those outside the service, it helps cross-team learning and cross-team sharing as well. Every Monday we had a training session for all of our team leaders and our team managers, and we looked at those soft skills such as embedding service change, coaching, nudging behaviours, and problem solving. Now these sound simple, but if you've never had formal management training, then actually you don't get into a car and drive. You need to be supported how to do that. And so if you don't know what a trigger point is, then actually how do you resolve it? And so all of that work around emotional intelligence, and how you support a staff, an officer who maybe is not being able to cope with the daily stress of a job, then that's key for us. And then every Wednesday we would pull together all of our officers, and those managers who had been trained on Monday would then train staff. And our huddles as well are they're officer led. And so it's not a team leader leading a huddle in the morning, it's a member of the team leading a huddle every morning. And what we've found through that is opportunities for officers to step up and sort of look at their potential going forward. For me, I'm a bit long in the tooth of how I've sort of delivered housing services, but an opportunity to deliver a service differently has been a welcome change. The feedback that we've had from officers has been very good as well. I'll just read some of it out. This is brilliant. This is such an easy way to address problems. I think this problem-solving session was really good. Can we organise another problem-solving session already? So really positive feedback. We did officer surveys at the beginning of the programme. We did officer surveys at the end of the programme. When we are now coming towards the end of our 100-day plans, and so the key thing for us is, and we didn't want to lose the learning, and so it was vitally important that as we got to the end of our 3 months in October, that actually we challenged every team and we challenged every manager, we challenged myself to actually what do we want to achieve out of this. And so we set ourselves 100-day plans. We're coming up now towards the end of those 100-day. We're coming to the end of that now. And so actually, what happens next? So we've got PwC coming back in to sort of support us on those next steps. That then goes into our service plans for next year. And then our next steps are actually embedding this service change, sharing this as well, because if you've never been into a huddle, it's quite hard to imagine what it's like me to sort of doing that on a daily basis. But it's actually a really good opportunity for us in problem solving. And one thing we have seen is that as a housing needs service and as a tenancy management service, we've noticed that when we concentrate on projects, we're really very good. And actually look at some of the work we're doing around rough sleeping, you look at some of the work we're doing around domestic abuse. And so actually what the PwC work has been able us to do is sit back slightly and actually look at a project-driven service And so when we were talking earlier about our evictions from the private rented sector, well, actually, that's a project area for us now because of the opportunity that Perform Plus has shown us. And so we're able to group a number of officers around that particular work with landlords. We've seen it around single homeless as well, so those approaching homeless who are individuals as opposed to those with families. And also we're looking at those other opportunities for sharing learning, such as tenancy management. Obviously, we have families in temporary accommodation, we have families in the private rented sector. Once you get into rent arrears, the support you would give a council tenant is the same support you would give someone in the private rented sector. So we are sharing that learning across those services. And so for me as a new housing director, this is actually a perfect time to understand that synergy. The report then sort of goes into sort of what those 100-day plans are. It mentions things like operating rhythm and celebrating success, etc. But actually, we've put ourselves in a really positive position going into this financial year, into the next financial year, where actually we're under an awful lot of pressure to deliver the service that we expect, that we want to deliver, but obviously with more pressures coming through the front door. And so this has put us on a very good platform for that. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions from members? Councillor Gardner.
Right. A lot of it is management speak that went completely over my head. Can you let us know how much you paid or how much PwC were paid?
I'd have to bring the figure back to you, Councillor Gardner, on
Could
that.
you?
Yeah.
Considering we're thinking about money. Just out of interest, encouraging the use of rock time in diaries and respecting other people's rocks. Would you like to explain
yes,
that?
apologies. That's rock and sand is it's basic. If you spend all your days on emails, that's regarded as sand. Rocks are project items, so I want to write a policy that says how we're going to deal with damp and mould. That's a rock. By achieving that particular goal and the operational working practices around it, then actually we've got a really important piece of work done by the council. So that would be regarded as an immovable structure. So that's the rock. The sand is not being able to do that because you're dealing with too many reactive problems. And so it's the idea that you put time aside in a week, an officer puts time aside to do casework, to call clients back, to update personal housing plans, rather than just from jump to item to item. It's prioritising your workload, perhaps, is another way of explaining it. But it's a bit management talk, and I apologise for that. But actually, for an officer, in a way of describing to myself and to anybody about how you manage your time well, including outside of the office as well, it's actually a very useful way of describing it, because you can fill up a big bowl with sand very quickly, whereas you won't be able to get the rocks in. Have I gone too far on that, Councillor Gardner, now for you?
I've lost the will to live.
Okay.
Actually. Thank you.
There's some very good videos.
No, I mean, you're incredibly enthusiastic. I'll give you that.
It's been a really good opportunity to look at running a service with it differently. Now, we're not changing the fundamentals. We're still a statutory service. We still have to do homeless assessments. We have to manage tenants, etc. But actually, how we engage as we're a big service. We've got 150 plus staff within tenancy management and housing needs, and how we work closer together on a daily basis is key for actually success, which is an incredibly stressful environment for a lot of our officers at the moment, with increasing applications, increasing needs of our council tenants. And so this way of engaging everyone on a much softer level and on a daily level, especially with home working as well. If you think of officers are not in the office every day, but getting everyone together every morning at 9 o'clock, 9:30 to talk about the day ahead brings the people at home into the office, and so it actually helps you share a lot easier and helps the managers sit back as well, because they've done that morning session with their team, and so actually they know what they're doing for the day ahead, and actually it stops that scrambling around that sometimes happens in busy services. I'm very enthusiastic about it.
Councillor Gardner, you have an enthusiastic question.
Have you ever considered having a juggler in or a clown to perhaps inspire the staff?
Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. I was going to say rock on, but maybe not. I know the wheels in housing turn extremely slowly, and I know your staff are very stretched. But one question I wanted to ask is, if and when I raise a housing issue, is it possible that the officer who takes on the case can see it from start to finish? Because often when you go back to an officer to raise something, you get somebody else, and so it's sort of trying to sort of tie up loose ends, and the resident who's asked the question is not sure. Thank you.
I agree, and I think wherever we can do that, we will do that. I mean, certainly if you're a tenant, you have a tenancy management officer who hopefully, unless they leave, will be the same person. And within our housing needs service, anyone unfortunately, if they're on a homelessness journey, should have the same caseworker. I think over the last couple of years, like a number of council departments, we've had a number of staff leaving and entering the service, and so a resident may have had a number of different caseworkers through a process. And in some cases, the casework process can be quite lengthy. If you're coming in as a eviction from the private rented sector, if you came in today with your notice from your landlord, you could be working with us for 6 months plus. Whilst we're trying to look for another option for you, or your landlord's progressing it to county court. But certainly I will take that back, and we recognise that as well, because when our officers and when I'm putting together responses, it can be, if you are right, it can be confusing for a tenant to sort of say, well, actually you dealt with this person and now you're dealing with this person. And certainly from a member's perspective, knowing who to come to and who can answer a query for you, I think is important.
And confusing for the councillor as well.
Yes, I understand that. Yeah.
Especially with La Carta and things like that coming into the equation.
Yeah, I mean, as much as we as we all know, we're moving a lot towards the self-service sort of council, and Locator, which is obviously our online housing register. Most customers are able to interact with that, but as what I mentioned at the beginning, what we are looking to do, and is pre-housing advice on if you want to join the housing register. At the moment, you can just go online. There's various bits on our website that sort of that gives you indications of what your need is, where you could be if you're going to be accepted and banded. But actually, are there other options to make? And so there's a piece of work for us to do to offer support to tenants, offer support to residents before they put an application in. If that application then is going to be refused or turned down, or they may go onto the register, but because of their banding position and because we have over 3,000 residents on the housing register, actually it would be an awfully long time before they were able to be successful. Our housing advice and homelessness system is also online as well, so people can make applications online. But as you're aware, we're a fully accessible service, as in we have a reception that people can come and see us, people can phone us, and so we hope that we are open to all forms of approach, not just online.
Thank you.
Councillor Gohill.
Thank you, Chairman. As Councillor Sullivan said, the wheels on the housing department do turn quite slowly. But it's also fair to say that at least the majority of my casework seems to be housing related, and probably for many other councillors as well. And so I was actually quite pleased to see some of these percentages that you mentioned in the report. 80%, 83% of staff agreeing that their team works well together. It's important to have a team that works well together, and behind all the rocks and the sand analogies and whatnot. You mentioned KPIs and performance and how people work productively. So I suppose this is a question for you, Chairman. Would it be possible to bring Mark back to the committee at a future date to check in on the productivity of this new system, and if it still is continuing to work maybe 6-7 months down the line, because I think it's quite important to ensure we have a a team that is working, and if it is hopefully it's working as well as you say it is, because you're very enthusiastic about it. But I just want to make sure for the quality of the to ensure that we're maintaining the quality that we should be giving to our residents.
Thank you, Councillor Gohill. Housing are scheduled to come and visit this committee at various points throughout the year, but I'm sure in the future Mark will be happy to give a further update.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Great.
Of course.
Thank you very much. Councillor Punjar.
Thank you, Chair. I think my assumption is correct when reading this report, that the objective was to boost morale and productivity amongst the staff. Am I correct in that?
That's right, as well as ensuring that we're efficient in what we do. I mean, we've got to look at if we think about a customer journey through us, how many handoff points are there, for example? If you're coming in and seeing a triage officer, then seeing another officer, is that an effective way of working? And so it was about looking at our processes, and actually by officers setting their own KPIs, it's, well, what do you think is important on a daily basis? And actually our good practice guide and our 100-day plans and etc. actually look at ways of doing things differently. And so that and hopefully by doing that, one, the resident gets a better service, but two, we've freed up officer time as well, because actually we're setting officers daily and weekly challenges that should then be able to reduce their casework and actually if you think about the government's aims of a personal housing plan, is actually a continuously updated document that journeys someone's homeless application with the local authority, that every interaction that client has with a councillor, for example, or with a third sector organisation such as a charity is then documented with that. Now, of course, that it's great to say that, and it's wonderful to have that document, but actually what we did find, officers weren't able to be able to update it as much as we would hope because of the demands of the service, the number of applications. But through this, we're hoping that actually officers are able to get some time back to be able to do that, in order that actually those plans become a lot more holistic, and that actually maybe there's less post in your mailbag, because actually the officer is fully aware of the service they're going to receive through us.
So therefore it's effective project management.
That's right, yes, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, so therefore, if that's because the report is talking about Perform Plus and all the wonderful ways in project management affects your, brings, let's say, unity amongst your team. So therefore, I suppose the next stage would be, what are the differences? So what did you have before, and what are the differences, and what do you outline as your key points that the housing needs to look at to kind of make sure that this is a benefit?
I can give one practical example. So sure. what we've noticed, and I'd sort of alluded to this in the report, is that actually when we have officers who concentrate on specific service delivery areas, we're actually able to increase the level of support to those residents. So, for example, we've created a single homeless team. We did that before Perform Plus came. And that was the idea, that we had a group of officers that would deal with single homeless. For those who are coming into the council, a lot of our single homeless are vulnerable because of a lot of reasons. It could be health needs, it could be sort of drug, alcohol, etc. And so actually engagement with local partners was a lot more holistic when you had a smaller group of officers concentrating in that, rather than a collective of sort of 20 officers. And so actually what we're doing this year is looking at those other project areas as well. I've talked about it with private sector evictions. One area we're looking at is domestic abuse as well. We're actually having a sort of a group of homeless caseworkers who are concentrating in specific projects, enabled to actually upstream. Actually, our domestic abuse applications are the highest we've ever seen. And so actually our target this year is actually to really upstream that, understand where they're coming from, and understand what work we can do in that area to support them and move them on in a quick way. And so by having these project areas, with the work we've done with PwC, it almost sets the base for us to set those up properly and be able to sort of run with them over the course of the next six months to a year.
Thank you very much. Do you want to briefly finish, Councillor Punjab?
I just wanted to ask if there was any opportunity in the progress of what you've invested into, to maybe, in the near future, to look at case studies of if you look at domestic violence, for example, and looking at those case studies to see how well this system has worked and why it continues and what the impact has been, because I think that would be a really important thing for us to learn here.
If we're coming back later in the year, then we'll bring case studies with us then.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other members indicating, so thank you very much, Mark, for your attendance this evening, and you're free to leave whenever you wish to do so. We move now on to the next item on our agenda, which is the Select Committee's review into alligating and the scoping report, pages 57 to 68. And we have Helena and Natasha with us this evening. Good evening to you both. If you would be so kind to introduce this report to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So we have helped Liz in terms of our input into this scoping report for the alligating review. And I would like to say we really do appreciate being selected for this review. Although the alligating scheme has been going for many years and has seen many changes, I don't think we should ever take any service for granted, and I think it would be really insightful to receive comments from the councillors from this committee following the acceptance of this scoping report. I think it will help to continue to shape the service. That can only be for the benefit of residents as well. So, particularly for councillors who may not be familiar with the alligating scheme, what the report sets out are the page 60, the background to the scheme, just making it clear this is a grant up to 90% which the council can give to benefit schemes covering up to 6 households, and this is related to the gating of private alleyways. It's seen very much as a community-led initiative. So, although the council will provide the funding to enable the gate to be installed, it really is down to the residents in terms of the future maintenance and upkeep of the alley gates as well. What we have just started to pilot in the last financial year, we recognise that there are a number of older schemes within the borough, like 10-year plus. And for those schemes, it might well be that the original gating contractor is no longer in business, or there may be repairs that are needed to those schemes as well. And so for those residents, if they are able to contact the team, we have piloted being able to support with repairs for older schemes as well. So we're recognising where a scheme, like I said, has been in place for some time and needs repair, but is obviously proving its worth in terms of minimising antisocial behaviour, that those residents need to be supported to ensure that safety is continued. We've given some data for the past financial years in terms of the number of applications which have been approved, the number of households that's covered, and average costs. And there's also a much more detailed appendices showing in terms of the areas where gating is taking place as well. I think in terms of the actual review, it's been suggested that a witness session could include some local residents who benefited from the scheme, either perhaps recently or perhaps a few years ago, or perhaps a mix of that as well. It was also suggested possibly a representative from another local authority. I would say in preparation for that, Natasha has been ringing round and going on websites of other local authorities. So of the 6 West London boroughs, only Ealing has an alligating scheme at the moment. Harrow doesn't, Hounslow doesn't, Hammersmith and Fulham doesn't, and Brent doesn't. And Natasha also went further afield, so out to Buckinghamshire, Hertfordshire, and to other London authorities, Richmond and Barnet. They don't have schemes as well, so it looks like it would just be, in terms of a comparison, it would be Ealing, which would be the other local authority that you might be if they're able to attend a future meeting as well. That's probably the summary of the scoping report.
Thank you very much, Helena. Are there any questions or comments from members? For me personally, as I said, I've seen this report before it come to the committee, and I had some input into it, and particularly into point 5 on the terms of reference. What I would like to see this review to do is to look at the older schemes, and I note from your report that it went back as far as 2018. However, the scheme has gone back a lot further than that. I think the scheme originally started in sort of 2007, 2008. So perhaps a longer or a revised list of the other schemes that are in place beyond 2018 would be helpful going forward as part of this review to see what schemes are still in place. But in particular, the issues that residents have with the gating schemes. I know that the approach is that we give them the keys, the nice shiny gates, and off you go, bye-bye. But of course the problems persist, and as these schemes get older, the problems increase. And I'm quite encouraged. I think we will see a lot of this come out from our witness sessions. I've suggested a couple of witnesses, but indeed if members have any other suggestions for people who want to come forward and discuss the issues or the benefits they see to this gating scheme, it would be helpful to this review, I believe. But we will be hearing from them in regards to some of the issues they're having around key holders, bank accounts, things like that, which form a part of this scheme. And it'll be interesting to shed some light on that and see what areas of improvement we can do as an authority, in addition to the safety and crime prevention.
I think the team would appreciate it. As like I say, the delivery and the implementation of the allocating scheme has been well embedded, but I think, as you say, that there are lessons to learn in terms of supporting residents for the older schemes. And I think there's a lot that our service can learn as part of this scoping review as well.
Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Helen and Natasha, who are in my good books today with good news on chrysalis funding. But just wanted to understand, could we get something into a session where people maybe, there's been, not disputes, I don't want to use that word, but where maybe half of the neighbours want the alley-gate, the other half don't, some want to pay it. So somebody that was absolutely fundamentally opposed to having an alley-gate put in. There might not be many of them, but I'm not assuming, in this world not everybody agrees with everything all the time. Parking management schemes are one example. Could we try and find somebody that maybe wasn't for it and the understanding why they weren't for it as potentially coming as a witness? Might be a little bit more difficult to find, but
I'm sure we can try and find, maybe from our SNTs as well, they may have some comments they wish to make on the schemes from the crime prevention part of it. Councillor Gardner?
Actually, that's what I was going to say. It'd be good if we had the police here, because we've got problems with alley gates in Hayes Town, and the police have got an opinion.
Councillor Farley?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, to the witnesses, I would like to see or hear from council officers and departments. I'm aware that a lot of fly tipping continues regardless. But that's the gate there, there's still fly tipping and waste and the consequences of that. So I would like to hear from officers and the issues that, or the consequences of an alley gate or not having an alley gate has on other departments within the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments, questions? I was surprised that there's only just one other authority with a gating scheme, which was Ealing. I remember that at the time when I used to live in Ealing, but I thought there might have been some more authorities further afield that perhaps do this scheme. It's quite surprising.
No, I mean, obviously there are 32 London. I think we've only just started in kind of like the west part. I mean, because we weren't sure whether, if we went to authorities such as Bromley or Bexley or around there, but we could certainly contact some other boroughs, but whether it would need to be an online appearance in terms of attending a scoping review. I I'm not sure what the flexibility, if that would be something that we can offer to other councils as well.
Yes, that probably would be achievable. We could probably have somebody joining virtually. That would be a possibility. Or perhaps they could give some input in writing or something like that if they weren't able to attend. Might be another option.
Yeah. Certainly our team, we can see what other local authorities we can say, but certainly within West London, Ealing would be the comparative neighbouring borough.
Okay, thank you very much. I know the report referred to a site visit as well. I'm sure there's plenty of schemes we can think of we can go to, but I suppose it's more having the resident engagement as well, in addition to just going down and seeing some gates. So if anyone has any suggestions, that would be appreciated. Other than that, are we happy to note the contents of the report? Thank you very much, and thank you, Helena and Natasha, for your attendance this evening. And we look forward to seeing you over the course of this review. Thank you. Go on then.
Can I make a suggestion? The officers that end up at the end of the thing, can we next time arrange for them to be nearer the beginning of the agenda? Because I think it's quite unfair that they're sitting here this late.
I did offer them to go first, to be honest, in my
did
defence.
you?
But however, it is my rule of thumb that if we have witnesses here who volunteer their time to come here, I will always take them first on the agenda. So yes. Well, we'll be nice, Helena, don't worry. Thank you very much, both. Okay, item 9 is the forward plan, page 16. Thank you, Janet. Councillor Gardner. Item 10, the work programme, pages 81 to 86. No, it's not. Councillor Farley. You just want to leave by past. I know your game. Love Island. Okay. Councillor Farley, apologies.
I gather there's a mature version coming, so hey ho. Anyway, I would like to ask. I would like to ask on visits. We've got the Pearfield amenity site. I realise that the usually one is only open on weekends, but I would like to see that one as well, and what goes on there, and how it, particularly pretty arranging a contrasting to what happens at Harefield and usually. I'm not sure if we can do that on a weekend, but I would like to see if that's at all possible to do. And it was mentioned, I think Councillor Goho mentioned it about Locata earlier. When we've had member development days, I know this has come up there, but some people can attend member development days, some people can't. And I would like to get, for the committee's purposes, an understanding of Locata, how it works. It's not a system that, as councillors, we use, but I think it would be helpful for us to understand that as a committee, if there's the opportunity to see that. Thank you.
I'm happy with those suggestions. I don't know if members wish to feed into that. No? So the Locata system in general, sorry, Councillor Farley, so just perhaps a presentation on the system itself, or going to see officers? A
presentation or something that allows us to see how it works, because it's, like I said, it's not something we use, generally speaking. As councillors, we don't use it. I've never seen it, I've never used it, so it's not something that I'm au fait with in terms of how it all works and how it all feeds into what officers do. So if we can see it live or whatnot, I don't know. It's something that I would like us to see and understand as members, but as a committee as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are we happy to note the work programme? Thank you very much. Okay, that concludes our business for this evening. Thank you very much. Safe journeys home, and see you all next month.
Thanks.